Ahead of a major party meeting, a series of mysterious explosions. What's going on behind the scenes? Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. Before we begin, in case you haven't heard, we now have China Uncensored merchandise. If you'd like to buy a t-shirt like this, or some of our other great t-shirts and mugs, check out chinauncensored.tv/merchandise. Get some cool stuff and support the show. So, China is kind of a black box. The Chinese Communist Party has total control over the internet and media inside China. It makes getting news out very difficult, especially during politically sensitive events. And China just had a big one. At the beginning of the month, there was a major meeting of top party officials called the 6th Plenum of the 19th Central Committee. I know, it just rolls off the tongue. The party wouldn't want anything to disturb such an important meeting, especially not some explosive news story, especially not some explosive news story, and definitely not 10 of them. And yet,
have you heard of this? Blasts in China. You may not have, because Beijing is making sure most media do not report it. It is hiding high-intensity blasts, explosions across the country, at least 10 of them that we can report. All within a week, 10 explosions, 10 bomb blasts in one country in less than a week.
Yeah, that's explosive. Made in China has a reputation for bad quality, but even for China, 10 explosions in a week is a little much. Now, it's always hard to confirm stories like this, and there's no evidence yet to suggest that these were anything more than accidents. But rumors are flying, because 10 explosions in a week, right before a major meeting of the Chinese Communist Party? A little suspicious. I'll go through them right after this quick commercial break. Welcome back. Who am I kidding? You didn't see an ad. YouTube often demonetizes videos where we show footage from inside China. Last week's episode about children being sent to the quarantine camps? Demonetized. I think talking about mysterious explosions will likely be treated the same. Except we can't afford to keep making this show at this rate. But you can help us fight YouTube censorship by supporting us on Patreon or Locals. Links to each are in the description below. And yes, I do feel bad making that plug in an episode about explosions in China. It's just that if we can't afford to keep making China Uncensored, that helps the Communist Party cover these stories up. And this is something that shouldn't be covered up. This massive explosion happened here in Shenyang, Liaoning province. According to official figures, 5 people were killed and more than 40 injured. That was on October 21st. This was blamed on a gas leak. The next day, there was an explosion at a chemical plant that killed 4. That happened in Inner Mongolia. Then, there was an entire day without explosions, which was followed by 2 explosions on October 24th. Those blasts happened in Nanjing and Dalian. In Nanjing, it was a laboratory explosion. In Dalian, the explosion happened at a residential building.
Another explosion struck China the same day. 2 people were killed and 7 others injured in the northeastern city of Dalian on Sunday.
That was blamed on a gas leak as well. Explosion number 5 happened the next day on October 25th in Qingdao City, Shandong. The blast happened on a street full of food vendors in the Huangdao district. According to Chinascope, the explosion was outside the Huangdao campus of Shandong University of Science and Technology. So, an explosion at a lab and an explosion at a tech university. Interesting. On October 26th, an explosion happened at a chemical plant in Zibo City, Shandong. Another explosion was at a residential building in Nanchang City, Jiangxi. And finally, 9 fishing boats caught fire in Zhuhai City, Guangdong. The 9th and 10th blasts happened on October 27th.
On the 27th of October, another blast rocked Guangdong. Now, we don't know very much about where exactly this happened or how many people were injured or killed, if at all. But we do know that on the same day, a blast also ripped through the city of Tianjin. So that's 10 blasts that we've counted so far. 10 blasts, 13 deaths, and many more injuries in just 7 days in China. And that's just on paper. It's hard to tell how much worse this story is.
And that's the thing with China. We have no clue what the full picture is. That's what happens when an authoritarian regime controls the press. For example, officially, China has reported less than 5,000 deaths from COVID. Total. The country where COVID began has one of the lowest death counts? Yeah, that's a cover-up. What about these explosions? I did show several state-run media articles about them, but while state-run media has reported some of these explosions, it isn't giving answers. And so this leaves everyone speculating what really is going on with these explosions, especially because this all happened right before a major meeting of the Chinese Communist Party. And now it's time for me to answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, fans who support the show on the crowdfunding website Patreon or on the subscription platform Locals. A person who opposes the CCP asks on Patreon, "Dear Chris, what would happen if Taiwan shot down one of the PLA planes violating their airspace? Presumably, the CCP would spin it as them being attacked unprovoked, but would the rest of the world believe them?" Well, that's a terrifying question. Taiwan says tensions with China are the worst in 4 decades. China has been sending record numbers of military aircraft near Taiwan. So far, they haven't actually breached Taiwan's airspace, but Taiwan scrambled their jets to meet Chinese forces when they crossed Taiwan's air defense identification zone. Anytime that happens, there's a risk of a deadly confrontation. China is playing a dangerous game. They want to keep harassing Taiwan like this to exhaust their forces. The PLA is also using this to gather information about Taiwan's radar systems and military practices. But if Taiwan actually killed a Chinese pilot, very likely there would be an outcry in China and a demand for military aggression. But I don't think the Chinese Communist Party wants to be pressured into a war that would involve the US, Japan, possibly even India and Australia. Right now, China could lose that war. They would prefer not to get into a full conflict until they feel ready. But sooner or later, the Chinese regime will be ready for a war. And if that's not prevented, the whole world would be drawn into the conflict. Thanks for your question and your support. And thank you to everyone who supports China Uncensored on Patreon or Locals. It's not easy to expose the Chinese Communist Party, and we could not do it without your support. So help support the show by contributing on Patreon or Locals. You'll get some cool perks, including having me answer your question on the show. Or you could get some of our new merchandise over at chinauncensored.tv/merchandise. Links to everything are in the description below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.